Hello, everyone, and welcome to AshaUSA's monthly speaker series called Breaking the Silence 2021. Thank you all for joining us today. Each month, we focus on a taboo topic and bring in experts to start a community conversation and answer some questions. Today's topic is the one that is dear to all our hearts. As we are going through a worldwide pandemic and experiencing changes and transitions back and forth in our daily lives, stress, tension, anxiety are the words that have become a part of our daily vocabulary. Irrespective of our age, gender, socioeconomic status, type of job we do, where we live, we are all anxious and might be eagerly finding ways to cope or survive on a day to day basis. To voice this concern and help us learn more about how to deal with anxiety, in fact, how to turn anxiety into an asset, we have with us Vineet Pandey. Welcome, Vineet.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, let's start with a little intro. Vineet was born in Canada and grew up in California, where he finished his education from Berkeley University. 4 years ago, he moved to Minneapolis and is currently an executive at Accenture. I'm going to ask Vineet to give us a little more background information about himself and his work and tell us how he came to this work that he calls Anxiety Asset. And before I hand it over to him, I want to let our audience know that this will be an interactive session. You can put your comments or questions in the chat box, and we will get to those eventually. Vineet is also going to share with us some useful resources at the end of the session. As you know, this session is being recorded and will be available to watch later on AshaUSA website and our YouTube channel. So here is Vineet Pandey.
Excellent. Can you all hear me? Can you
Yes,
get a
we
thumbs
can.
up? All
Yeah.
right, excellent. Well, first off, thank you so much, Asha USA Leadership, for providing the opportunity and platform for doing what you do for this community here in Minnesota. And as we can hear, we've got even some folks from Canada on the line here. So want to just say thank you for this opportunity. And thank you for those that have joined, whether you're joining live or whether you're joining this presentation in the future in a recording format. Know that anxietyasset.com is a venue and platform that is always available to you and you can access it there. So today I'm going to do a few things, and we have a smaller group on for our actual live event. So I'm going to make it a little more interactive than I typically do. So what I'd love to have is those that are part of the actual session, feel free to have a pen and paper in hand so that we can truly make it interactive. Before we start to make it interactive, before we get into everything, I just want to pose a question. What if we could use stress and anxiety to our advantage? I'll pause there. Does anyone have any reactions to this question? Feel free to jump off of mute and share what you think. Do you think stress and anxiety could be used an advantage? Why might you have come to this presentation in the first place?
Yes, you can. Actually, without stress, you'll never accomplish anything.
Love it.
The question is whether it's distress or eustress, right?
Right. No, I love how you put that. That's a really good framing. Anyone else?
I think stress can be used to indicate that something is important to us or that we're vested in it, and that helps us then assess where we want to put our time and energy.
Absolutely. No, and I think I can certainly resonate with that as well. Okay, well, I'm hearing some good responses from the group. let's continue. Let's go high level, zooming out. What are today's objectives? 3 things to walk away in this hour or so that we have together. Normalize, evangelize, and realize. Number 1, normalize. I want to normalize with you all the concept that anxiety is very normal and that we can use it to our advantage. And we'll talk about that shortly. Second, I want to evangelize the concept that not only is anxiety a normal thing, it can be used as an asset for everyone on a day-to-day basis. I want to evangelize this concept. Last but not least, I want to help you realize how you might be able to make anxiety as an asset through 3 practical means towards the end of this presentation. So 3 objectives for today. The first, before we do that, I do want to start with a poll. Let me get this screen sharing. So the poll, you'll have to answer the poll, go to menti.com and enter the code that you see in front of you. The poll's question, once you pull up the menti.com on your phone or tablet or even on whatever device you're streaming from, is asking, what % of Americans do you think are affected by anxiety? So I'll give folks a moment to either, take a chance to put it into the Menti, or even put it into the chat in case maybe you're not accessible to a Menti. And I'm going to flip over to the Menti to see live, what are we thinking? Okay, wow, okay, so far of all the responses, 100% of people think 25% of Americans, essentially adults, are affected by anxiety. The code is still up there, 93312456. Okay, seeing some other responses coming through, but looks like most people really think it's towards that end of the spectrum. It's not in that 12%, but it's really in that 25% range. So the answer, drum roll, is it's 18% of Americans, right? What does that translate to? 18% of Americans. So that's about, of a 300 million population, over 300 million people in the US, that's 40 million Americans. That's huge, right? And that's discounting for all the children, right? So it's a very large percentage, 18% of Americans. And let's go back to the presentation. I am one of those 40 million Americans with anxiety. When I came out to my friends and family sharing that I have anxiety, I had hesitation. I felt alone. I didn't know anyone with anxiety because of the stigma that mental health or lack thereof for those that are suffering through challenges can be very difficult. And so even though I knew the statistics of 40 million Americans with anxiety exist, I did not know anyone in my community that had anxiety. So when I was thinking about sharing this with anyone, it felt really very difficult. It's unlike other things that you might see if you get a physical sort of illness. If you scratch your arm or you have a band-aid and you can see it, you can have a cast on, right? Those are very visible things. Anxiety, other depression, things like that, very invisible. So when I did share with others that I was one of those 40 million Americans with anxiety, when I had the courage to share it, great things happened. Although it took a huge step for me to do it, I helped normalize the conversation. And in fact, I received a lot of support. I heard from at least a dozen people within the first week of me sharing that I'd started this website and this brand of Anxiety Asset, coming to me, sharing not only that I'm courageous to share this, but also that they have anxiety as well. They've been dealing with many different ways. One of the most crazy stories is that my childhood best friend came to me and said not only is he anxious, he's been taking medication for it since he was a young child, right? So these stories came to me when I normalized the conversation and made it such that people should share that they have anxiety because it's a very, very normal thing, right? Of course, There are those with low to moderate levels of anxiety, and that's where I count myself in the camp. There are people with very significant levels of anxiety, where anxiety may not be an asset. It may truly be a liability, where they may need to seek very professional help and things of that nature. But for those that may not be in the camp that I am in, which is the low to moderate levels of anxiety inconsistently, that's where I count myself in. And I am one of the 40 million Americans with anxiety. And so what I also want to share is on the surface, my life appears anxious-free. Just a little bit of background about myself is that, I like to be visual. So here's a map of my life. Lived all across North America. Those stars, those green stars on the page represent where I've lived across the US and Canada. Within each star, there's a number. Number 1 on the far right, where I was born in Canada, you see a picture of me and my brother at the mandir that we built. Quickly thereafter, left to California. My dad got a job there, shipped us out there to California, which was very difficult for us. No, I'm just kidding. The weather was beautiful. And so there was in a very competitive environment, high school in San Diego, but achieved a 4.41 GPA, top of my class, and thereafter went to Berkeley. When I was at Berkeley, I even had the chance with a cohort of mine to go to be featured on The Price is Right, which is a TV show for those that are familiar. And if you have the question, was I on with Bob Barker? I was not, unfortunately. It was with Drew Carey as the host at the time. But The Price is, I was there, and since then I've moved to the Midwest, where I've been working at Accenture for the past several years as an executive there. Fortune 500 company. On the surface, my life appears anxious-free, right? So not only when I shared with folks that I have anxiety last year, there was certainly a segment of people that thought, "What, Vineet, you have anxiety? Like you have your proverbial stuff together, and you're able to really take care of not only personal matters, right? Engaging with social and civic duties, but also professionally as well. So what gives, right?" And that leads me to my next interactive poll, which is a true or false question. Let's all go back to menti.com. This is a true or false around a question. Stress at certain levels, is it healthy or not? Go to menti.com and check it out. And it should be refreshing shortly. Here we go. All right, so the code again is 93312456. I'm seeing some responses in the chat. I'm seeing a false from an Archana Dubey. Okay, so I'm seeing mostly true, but and then maybe one or two Z falses. So what I will say is, first off, I believe this audience is very intelligent that I'm speaking with. You've hit both polls accurately. This is a true statement. Anxiety and stress at some levels are healthy for humans. What a profound statement. This reaches to another sort of conclusion, right? That while there are 40 million Americans with anxiety, science tells us that anxiety and stress at some levels is healthy for humans. So why aren't we talking about this? So when I had this realization that anxiety and stress at some levels are healthy for humans, in fact, when we think about fight or flight responses as a fundamental Homo sapiens, we do exhibit stress for rational reasons, right? If there is a tiger approaching us while we're getting water centuries ago, right, thousands of years ago, our fight or flight responses would activate and we would be induced in some stress or anxiety. We'd know to run away. Because there's no tigers that exist anymore, those grizzly bears that exist, we don't have to worry about those more basic needs. We're worried about public speaking, fear of sharks, crossing the street, other anxiety, potential anxieties that people might have on a more frequent basis or on a more individual basis. But anxiety and stress at some levels are healthy for humans. So let's go back to the presentation. and talk about how I came to the realization that I had anxiety through my stinky, sweaty feet problem. It's over 10 years ago, and I'm at my first job. I'm a management consultant, so I travel for work. This particular week, I'm in Los Angeles visiting a client in a small, muggy room with my team. This is my first job, my first project, first couple weeks at this particular company, and there was a rotten stench that was coming out that just was permeating the room, but I didn't really know what it was. I thought perhaps on the Monday that we arrived there, maybe it's someone brought some lunch that may not be should have been in the refrigerator, right? I'm personally a vegetarian, so I thought it definitely isn't going to be my lunch. The next day, I still smelt it, and then I took a moment to myself. Maybe it's not the lunch. I mean, I've been noticing. I took a moment to kind of realize I've been noticing some differences in my own self. I've been feeling more physical differences in myself, sweaty palms, at times rapid heartbeat, and especially given my first job, I felt these certain things, and in fact, I actually felt some sweat, some perspiration down in my feet. So I thought to myself, could it be me? Could it be me that's causing this stinkiness in the room, this odor? And when I got to my hotel room later in the night, I did realize that actually, when I thought about it more, it was that I tied my shoes so tightly that it created a stench that I felt that I personally could smell. If I could smell, then maybe others could. And at that moment, I realized, A, I've got to get new shoes or socks, okay, first off. But more seriously, B, I've never had to deal with stinky, sweaty feet. What is this happening to me? It didn't all register for me at once, but that was the moment when I realized I had anxiety and there was something different about myself. My stinky, sweaty feet problem. And that gets me to kind of concluding the first objective of this presentation, which is maybe an opening up to this group. Does anyone in this group have a stinky, sweaty feet problem? In other words, did any of you have a moment in your life where you realized that you had anxiety, that you felt that anxiety is potentially something that you want to work on? Did you have an aha moment like I did? Unfortunately, in my life, in that muggy room in Los Angeles. It's very personal, so I can totally understand if this is not something that folks don't want to talk about. But if you do want to talk about it, I'm always available to chat through. All right, so we're going to continue going through the next section, which is really accomplishing the second objective, which is how I want to not only normalize the concept of anxiety being something that we all have, but getting to the second objective, evangelizing the concept that anxiety is an asset. Here's a few ways that anxiety is my own asset. One is I don't drink caffeine. I don't need to consume caffeine. I feel I've got a natural energy, something I've been described as. And so I don't feel like I really need caffeine to get through my day. And I have natural energy to get through things. Anxiety is also an asset because I don't procrastinate my tasks or chores. I'm always thinking about what is next and how can I make sure it gets done on a timely basis, or if not, in advance. In fact, when I shared with my community that I had anxiety, I had shared it with one of my old supervisors, and he had said, Vineet, like from the surface, I had no idea that you had anxiety. I believed that, you were, just always on top of every deliverable that you were presenting or any presentation you gave. It was done really well. What he didn't know was on the inside, it took significant mental taxing and tolling for me to be able to present myself in such a way that I know how I should present myself, but getting to that destination took a lot of soul searching for me. So here's a few ways of how I've made anxiety my asset. And so what this now gets me to is the third section, third and final objective of the presentation, which is practical ways to realize your anxiety asset. And these are ways that have worked for me. These are ways that have worked for those in my community as well. And I know they will work for you. I just ask that as we go into this next section, not only to be open-minded, but to try one of these things today. Try one of them today, spend 30 seconds on it, because I know you will get something out of it. 3 ways. One is to turn your scaries into confidence boosters. Number 2, vocal self-affirmation. And number 3, when in doubt, talk it out. All right, let's go to the first one. Turning scaries into confidence boosters. So when I first began to realize that anxiety, I started to, not only did I have the physical manifestations, right? Sweaty palms or, fast heart rate, sweaty, stinky feet. I also realized there's a recurring pattern of my thoughts, almost sometimes obsessive, that made me feel like I was not able to do a particular thing. I call these scaries, or also fearful thoughts. So the objective of this is to really turn your scaries or fearful thoughts into confidence boosters. There's really 2 steps to do this. One is to start a scaries tracker. So take a diary or a journal, whatever you use, and over the course of a week, use that time to document, whenever you can, what is a fearful thought that is presented to your mind space. What you're seeing in front of you right here are some examples of this exact exercise that I'm describing that I performed on myself weeks ago. You can see the date is in the 3rd column. Subsequently, we've got the time and category. A couple observations just to make as I reflect on my own exercise of documenting the fearful thoughts that I've had. First is time. Many of the more fearful thoughts happen for me in the evenings. And so on a metaphysical basis, I, not even attacking or countering those fearful thoughts, I thought to myself, I wonder why the evening time is where I experience most of the fearful thoughts. And is there a way for me to, on a metaphysical basis, think about how I can work through working on that? So it's not a question we're going to solve for today, but I do want to get to each of the, I want to get through the fearful thoughts. I want you to think about a fearful thought that you've had this past week. And if you are open to sharing, I would love to open the floor up in a couple minutes for you to share a fearful thought that you've had and see if we can use this process into turning your scary into a confidence booster. I'll use one of my own as an example. Row 2, back-to-back social Zoom meetings making me feel uncomfortable. On this particular evening, on July 17th at 9 p.m., I had a client work happy hour followed by a birthday party. And we're still, especially with a newborn at home, still feeling like we're wanting to be more careful and be able to stay at home as much as possible. So Zoom is certainly the thing that is keeping our social lives really available to us. And at the end of the day, for me in this particular instance, I felt really, really fearful. I felt really anxious that I'd been through so much Zoom in one day. In addition to all the Zoom I was on throughout the day with my work and whatnot. I felt really, really anxious. What am I going to do about it? We'll tackle that on the next slide, but I'll pause here. Does anyone have any fearful thoughts that they experienced over the past week that they might want to share and talk through? And if you don't want to share, you can also write it down on that piece of paper that you pulled up at the beginning of this presentation.
I often get uncomfortable and really anxious when I'm driving past a certain speed and I'm doing lane changes. And I've noticed it's been increasing a lot lately, maybe because we're actually going out again. But I've definitely noticed that. So I struggle when I'm driving sometimes.
Thank you very much for sharing. That means a lot. And that is certainly a very real anxiety, right? Driving a massive, steel on wheels, like it can certainly draw some anxiety. I can see that.
Another very common thing that we used to do before, but now after COVID, it creates anxiety is going into places where there are a lot of people, whether it's a store or on the street or anywhere, or a restaurant. Because I think in the last year or 16 months, we have been so used to isolating ourselves, and also the virus is still there, so that's scary. It is really anxiety provoking, and since we don't know whether others are vaccinated or not, so just being out in public with a lot of people around is very anxiety provoking.
It's a massive transition, right? We spent all this time indoors because we've been trying to protect ourselves in a bubble, and then all of a sudden that bubble has bursted, and we don't know if that bursted bubble is it sharing those particulates in the air, potentially exposing us to the virus. To kind of extend and run with that analogy, maybe not, but I could see how that could be an anxious inducing scenario for folks. So that is great. So let's try and use the framework that I use personally, which I've encouraged others, my readers, to use when countering their fearful thoughts. So what you can see here is essentially a flow chart that I use when I want to turn a scary into a confidence booster. So for myself, back-to-back social Zoom meetings was causing a lot of anxiety. What I like to do is I like to first off have a self-awareness that I'm feeling anxiety, and there's a particular what is manifesting that anxiety. So in this situation, it's back-to-back social Zoom meetings. So in this situation, and I think here we'll start on the very far left, have I ever overcome that scary? So back-to-back social Zooms, I mean, I have back-to-back professional Zooms all the time, which make me feel that I can be a little bit anxious. So in some ways, yes, I have overcome that. So if yes, write it down and kind of articulate to yourself, not only in the sort of physical space, but also in the mental space, that I've been able to do this, and articulate it to yourself in some way. But let's run with a hypothetical. What if you hadn't overcome that? Maybe is there one thing that you can do to overcome the scary? And if we were to go with my thought, where back-to-back social Zoom meetings was was causing me a lot of anxiety, I think to myself, well, maybe it's just being in front of a screen and just engaging with social in some capacity. Why not try and turn things off? And so for me, one example here would be to overcome the scary is one thing to overcome in this hypothetical is to put my phone away and really focus on what's important in this moment, which is ensuring I get my livelihood and my breathing and sort of being one back in action. Of course, to the right of that, you can see a couple other things. There are certainly feelings and perceptions of if your barrier is insurmountable, right? If it is very insurmountable, I consider consulting a medical professional on how you might be able to overcome it. That's something that I personally do, and I know that could also be a really great asset and resource for folks. I know some folks had talked about changing lanes in something that you were talking about, changing lanes in a car. Like, do you think this framework is something that you could use for really overcoming your scary into a confidence booster?
Yep, no, I think the framework's really sound and I screenshotted it. So I think it's definitely something I could use.
Nice. Love it. Anyone else want to reflect on this framework or have any questions or thoughts?
So, Vineet, there's a question in the chat from Rajiv. If you want to
Okay,
take that.
sure. I'll open up the chat. So the chat, yep. So Rajiv is saying, I work with a lot of early stage first time entrepreneurs and their most common anxiety is what do I do so the company is still alive tomorrow? They are expecting me to be the professional to help them alleviate the anxiety. What can I do for them? That is a really great question, Rajiv. And I think first off, for these individuals to reach out to you and talk to you about their anxiety is a really amazing step because they may see you as a really enlightened individual who is open to this type of discussion, because recognizing the fact that many people are not opening to share that they have anxiety. So I think first off, thank you for creating that safe space for people to reach out to you and share that sort of sentiment. With that said, there are very difficult. It can be very difficult to help without more sort of professional ways, right? So I would recommend really two things. One is check out my website, anxietyasset.com, for practical ways through my blogging and podcast on how they can be directed to a resource there. And really, I think the second thing I would say is everyone experiences anxiety in a different way. And so what may work for me may not work for everyone else, right? So for me, I'm sharing some examples, and I'm happy to make these slides available for you, Rajiv, and share this with your community. This may not necessarily help everyone. You've really got to take a moment to think about what are their biggest challenges and anxiety-inducing moments, and how might they be able to counter them. Whether is it more physical, is it more mental? Ultimately, consulting a medical professional is also a great option as well. But those are just a couple of resources that you could share to start with. And I'm also happy to talk directly if there's other questions.
Thank you.
All right, let's keep going. So that was the first of 3 ways to help realize your anxiety as an asset. Now, the second one is vocal self-affirmation. Simply put, vocal self-affirmation is taking a phrase or a mantra, something that might be powerful to you, and allow those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words to give you a sense of strength in a moment of weakness, in a moment of anxiousness. This has worked for me. Maybe it'll work for you. I know it's worked for others. For example, I have a rotating list of phrases that I use, but in this particular example, I actually watched a show called Better Call Saul, and it's a show that's a spinoff from Breaking Bad, an award-winning Emmy, I don't know, dozens of Emmys that it's won. And the protagonist in the show, arguably could be the antagonist as well because of the character, his name is Saul. What Saul does is, in moments of anxiety, which he has all the time, as an attorney of very poor and economically challenged background clients, he goes into the bathroom, a public bathroom with multiple mirrors. He looks at himself and says, "It's showtime." And I thought to myself, man, Saul is kind of weird, but I'm also weird, and I've got anxiety, and he's got anxiety in the show. Let me try it. And I tried it. And it worked for me. And And so since watching that show as an inspiration for helping me give the strength for vocal self-affirmation. I also I know my dad, who's more on the religious end of the spectrum. He will use religious slokas to help him in moments of need or strength. And so that is certainly also something that could be used. It's showtime, use what you need to. But vocal self-affirmation, not just saying it to yourself in your mind, but saying it out loud. In fact, me just repeating it's showtime is making me feel not only happy, but it's also giving me a further reduction in my nerves. I would love to hear from anyone here. Do you have any vocal self-affirmations that work for you, whether in the chat or come out and say it? Or do you use this? Or if you don't, do you have a vocal self-affirmation phrase that you might be able to use in the future?
In the chat, there are a couple of comments.
Okay.
Shall, do you want to say it?
Yeah, Shawl. I see Shawl's. A diamond is never made without pressure. I like that one. I might steal that one, Shawl. Sandhya Didi, just take the right next step and lotus grows in the mud. Wow. Really, really good ones. So it sounds like folks have this. So some folks are using vocal self-affirmation as an option. I see Rahul may try in the future. So maybe this is something that you want to try as a new way of managing your anxiety. I am strong, I am powerful, I am confident. I love that. Simple but powerful in those few words. Rajiv, हमको मन की शके देना मन विजय करे दूसरों की जय इस पले
हमको मन की शक्ति देना मन विजय करे दूसरों को जय से पहले खुद की जय करे.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. I love hearing these self-affirmations. And I want to normalize it, right? Like we need moments where we want to self-affirm ourselves, right? And it's really important to do that. It's a very quick one, but very helpful. All right, let's go to the third and final one. When in doubt, talk it out. Does anyone recognize this person on the screen? Either in the chat or say it out loud.
No.
That's Deepika Padukone.
Yes. If I was in person, I would give you a high five, say Ali. So Deepika Padukone, does anyone know why I have her on the screen? Bonus points, bonus virtual high five.
Okay, I'm going to say, but unless anybody else wants to say it first. Okay, so
She's
Deepika,
more open about her mental health issues. She speaks about it more openly. She's made the topic more less of a taboo to discuss. And by talking out, she is kind of, I think she's publicly shared her anxiety, what she deals with. And I think that has helped her to deal with it.
Excellent. I mean, I feel like I've got a great audience that could give this presentation for me, and the next time I have to do this. So that is exactly correct. Deepika Padukone, the global Bollywood superstar, right? In 2016 and 2017, came out to the world with anxiety and depression as a result of her grueling film schedule, and in fact shared it on a very large global platform, the WEF, the World Economic Forum, which happens every year in Europe. When I read that she had anxiety and depression, it helped normalize it for me personally, right? I'm no Bollywood superstar, nor am I aspiring to be, but this person who's, arguably does some very difficult things on a day-to-day basis has shared with the world that she has challenges with mental health. And in fact, so much so that she has founded a foundation called Live, Love, Laugh, Foundation Against Depression and Anxiety. And when she founded this organization, she trended and made viral the hashtag Dubara Pucho. Anyone know what Dubara Pucho means? I'm seeing some people that speak Hindi. Yes, it means ask again. What does that mean, right? Let's translate. Let's take a moment to unpack that. Dubara Pucho, meaning let's just play another role play with myself and someone that's a friend of mine. The friend asks me, "How are you doing?" I typically will respond immediately and in a one word saying, "I'm good." Next time you might hear a response like that, that's just short, quick response. Dubara pucho. Ek aur bar pucho. Ask again. How are you really doing, Vineet? How are you really doing, friend? And that's what this hashtag is all about, is to just talk it out. When in doubt, talk it out. And that's the third way to realize anxiety as an asset. And in fact, there are 3 ways that you can talk it out. One, first and foremost, is talking to someone. So friend or community. Now, I know some thoughts can be very private to some people, right? You may not want to share some of your deepest scaries. Maybe if it's a scary for you, it may not be as scary for someone else. And, judgment, things like that, that is totally okay, right? If it's so private, you can seek professional help. And I will say that I have weekly therapy with a therapist. And I think of it as, how we have physical therapy for you're trying to just maintain health on a bad back or something like that. Physical therapy is analogous to mental therapy, which is getting professional help. And it's very accessible and affordable. There's also joining a support group. In fact, there's a great, Rajiv, this might be a good resource for the entrepreneurs you work with. A group, it's called PACE, P-A-C-E, and it's basically online-based group therapy, about $200 a month. And it is, it's been recommended to me by my friends. They said it's great. It's been a great way to meet like-minded folks where you're paired with individuals with a group of 7 or 8 folks. You meet on a monthly basis, and you're facilitated by a professional. So lots of different ways on how you can, when in doubt, talk it out. So I want to recap today's objectives, which were threefold. 1, I want to normalize the fact that anxiety is prevalent. 40 million Americans with anxiety. Anxiety, at some levels, can be a good thing. Secondly, I want to evangelize that anxiety can not only be perceived as a liability, but also as an asset. Third, realize. I want others to realize anxiety as their asset. And if I can help one more person realize anxiety as an asset, I think my job here is deemed successful. I'd love to stay connected by either sharing your email in the chat, subscribing for monthly tips at my website, anxietyasset.com, or following my Instagram at anxietyasset. I should update this page because I also started a podcast on YouTube and Spotify, so you can check it out there. Some of my most popular website content is down below. If you're feeling Zoom anxiety, I've shared 6 ways to reduce your Zoom anxiety that have worked for me. I've also done some men's mental health pieces as well on there. I'll pause there. That is the sort of formal conclusion of my presentation, but I'd love to answer any other questions that may have come up through our discussion.
Vineet, yeah, this was really useful information. One question that I have is, especially in our South Asian community, as you know, there's a lot of taboo about mental health illnesses. And generally, the response is that, no, you're just stressed out because, you're doing too much. Just slow down, maybe a good night's sleep, maybe go for a walk and you'll be fine. Or you are in your room the whole day, why don't you just go out and meet some friends and you'll be fine? So, and those are the things that a person with anxiety will have very hard time doing, right? So what do you think are some of the tips you will give as a person of South Asian origin that we or the community in general can do to be more supportive of people with anxiety?
That is an excellent question, and a question that I ponder a lot on, especially as a millennial. And I know if those that are in more of the younger age group, um, raised in the US, seeing that in at least from South Asia, mental health is really not talked about. And so I wonder not only what I wonder first why, and then I'll help answer the question. So the why to that is, I think in South Asia, there at least from my family background, it appeared that a lot of aspects of living in South Asia is focused on sort of your physical and well-being, right? I think the mental aspects aren't really talked about that much because you may be trying to figure out how you might be able to get take care of shelter over your head, right? At least now, electricity is something that isn't an issue, but there are still parts of India where electricity is an issue, right? Maybe a decade or two ago, that was an issue. I mean, my family is from Benares, and in Varanasi, the city, at least only until the last 5 or 6, 7 years ago, electricity has been a consistent thing. So, I mean, the why is something I've wondered. I think the reason is that there's not enough time for us to spend on getting to anxiety because you're focused on more basic needs, kind of in reflection of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You really need to focus on those very fundamental things first before you get to the next level. So the why is, I think there are some aspects of focusing on your physical needs before you get to your mental needs. And here, what I would say is just that, right? We are in a different place here in North America with different needs. That's why I brought up the why. And those needs aren't just about we have electricity. Is a subjuala just going to come tomorrow because there's a monsoon? Is he going to actually come to my house, right? The Tela, right? Maybe not. But like here, we can go to Aldi. We can go wherever we want. So what's presented in North America are different challenges, and those challenges aren't more maybe physical in nature, but more on mental in nature. And in the path towards self-realization, whether or not you're religious or not, everyone is trying to go towards a path of realizing themselves, right? And so I think it's important for folks to normalize this concept of mental health because every community, every part of the world has different challenges that they face. That's a challenge that we face here, and it's prevalent in the numbers. 40 million Americans with anxiety, and then there's probably many more millions that have it, but that don't report it because they may fall into the South Asian group that say, well, it's just tension and I'll get over it my own way. But they never report it to a doctor. And so I believe that 40 million is in fact likely severely, significantly understated.
So we need to have a question. As a parent, a lot of times anxiety is good, right? Like you talked about it initially, when you have anxiety, sometimes like it kind of forces you to pay attention and focus on what you're studying and get stuff done. So some level of stress and anxiety is good. So where do you draw the line? It's like looking at, like, if somebody's going through it and if they're able to manage it, then it's okay. As a parent, when do you say there's a red flag there, or how do you look for some of those signs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think some signs of the red flag signs, which I've personally experienced at times in my life, are when you are unable to accomplish day-to-day tasks and chores, not even maybe go to school because of you're feeling ill or sick or you're challenged in some way. If you're unable to kind of do those things, I think that's when you really need to take a time out and talk to your children. And if the children are unable to do that, I think that's a moment where you tell yourself, maybe this is a time for us to take this a little more seriously and consult some medical professionals. Therapy is very accessible and affordable, right? It's not hundreds of dollars, and therapy isn't a very commonplace topic that we talk about because in the South Asian community, because it's so taboo. I would highly encourage, though, if you can be more open to the yellow flags instead of getting to a red flag, try and get to the yellow flag symptoms, right? Like maybe obsessive worries, or inability, feeling more sweaty, more physical manifestations, sweaty palms, perspiration in other places, right? If you can get to those yellow flag symptoms, you can prevent your child from getting to those red flag symptoms where they may not even want to do anything in society. They want to be just at home and just stay in their room. So I would highly recommend, before getting to those red flags where they're unable to engage with their go to school or actually show up to their extracurriculars, try to monitor for those yellow flags.
So you're suggesting is when you see some level of anxiety, use resources like anxiety asset or other areas to see if they can deal with it before it becomes a red flag. Are you kind of suggesting something like that?
Yes.
So there's a question in the chat from Heidi, and the question is, what is the best way to help someone else who has anxiety and doesn't want the help?
Oh my gosh, this is a wonderful question. I have a loved one who has been in denial about their anxiety for quite some time and has never wanted any help, never asked for any help. And it's very challenging. So first off, I'll empathize with you, Heidi, that it's very difficult to watch on the sidelines while someone is potentially coexisting with a level of anxiety that they don't want to really deal with, whether through, turning their scaries into confidence boosters, vocal self-affirmation, or the Bada Pucha, right? Any of those ways, or multiple other ways that are available on various resources. I think for me, it's what has helped my loved one to be able to share the fact that they need help is to expose them to other people in the world that have anxiety and to help normalize it for them. So for my particular loved one in this example, they were, they wouldn't really listen to me because of my relationship with them. It didn't seem, it was more of a one-way street in terms of engagement, in the terms of the relationship. But when I started to show them TED Talks, I showed them my website and podcast, and showed them when I interviewed a particular author and speaker that's famous about mental health, and when they showed and shared their personal experiences, it helped normalize it for them and realize that, oh, like I'm listening to this person speak, and that, hey, I have those things, and hey, maybe there is something I need to do, and maybe I can have a better quality of life, and maybe potentially make anxiety an asset, right? So, I think exposing folks to the fact that anxiety is a thing, and maybe to folks in the community or through various resources, can help normalize it for them and help take that step. But Heidi, I know it's difficult to do this, but that is certainly something that's important.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we are almost to the end of the hour. Unless anybody else has any comments or questions. Otherwise, Vineet, do you want to just let us know, have a final word?
I'd love to. Look, anxiety is real. Many people have it. I have it. And I strongly encourage you to take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. Know that anxiety at low to moderate levels can be a superpower for you. Make anxiety your asset. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Vineet.